Oh boy, so 2021 has been an invasion of handhelds, expensive and cheap. So I just wanted to make in this video the top 10 handhelds for 2021, and it's going to be up for, let's say, $60 and less. So it's going to be like the budget series top 10 handhelds for the people who just want to search for a fun piece of technology to play your games with, but don't want to have like spending a pile of money. Overall, like, there's a lot of great choice, and I have picked up my personal top 10, and I will explain in this video why I chose these systems. Because when it comes to cheap devices, these things will have flaws, problems, or maybe some poor emulation in general, but most of these things are pretty damn awesome. So I hope you really enjoyed this video and helped out. Consider subscribing, become one of the Wicked family, hit the little bell, and let's go with the show. Okay, so for the number 10 position, I choose the NES Pocket Duo. Yeah, I already said it, it's an 8-bit system. And the reason I want to use only one single 8-bit system in this video is because I think the 8-bit system are really fun to play. I personally really love the 8-bit or slash NES Famicom. And this thing was one of my favorites for 2021. So where the previous models I've reviewed here on the channel have a TV out, also this thing comes with a TV out. But the idea behind this thing is like it's going to be like a hybrid system. You can plug it in like with a game system and just use the two controllers. It's like freaking awesome. It doesn't have like a gazillion games like other versions. It got quite some interesting games on it, a lot of cool homebrew games too. So the mix of games, combination with a very nice high quality handheld, and it comes with a built-in battery. You can also use normal batteries. The LCD display that comes in this is not IPS, but it's still in better quality than I've seen before. When I recall, it was 3.5 inches. But I do like it, like the way how this thing plays, even without a normal D-pad, like 4 buttons. Normally I hate this, but it's like playing very well. So also the emulation itself was your typical 8-bit handheld. It will have some minor screen tearing, but the overall performance was quite good. Also when it comes to the audio quality, I noticed it didn't have the same issues that we had before. And of course, in combination with the game console or the hybrid function, we can connect this thing to your old CRT that looks of course the best with this old school analog output. Because this thing doesn't have an HDMI out, it's like really basic and also like really cheap. You can also buy this thing without controllers if you just want to have the handheld. So, but I was surprised to see that it works quite good. The 2.4 GHz controllers are playable, and not to forget, like, these things feel almost authentic to the original NES. I don't want to make an 8-bit top 10 like I did last years. If you want to, you can always leave it in the comments if you want to see that. But in the end, it's more of the same. And this is, in my opinion, the best you can get at the moment. So for the number top 10, I'm choosing the NES Pocket Duo. Because I think it's pretty damn awesome. Yeah. For the number 9 position, I choose the PAPKIII. So basically we're having two models, and basically the outer shell is different, but we're going to focus on the PAPKIII number 3 Plus because that version is still for sale and it is basically under the price of $60 as we are making this video. So I must say that the PAPKIII 3 is a very interesting piece of technology. Take consideration, this is like the same story with the cheap device I've reviewed here on the channel when it comes to emulation performance, for what you can play with it. But I think the PAPKIII is still one of my favorites and still one of the better ones when it comes to this. And there is even some custom firmware for. And with the custom firmware we have the option even to mess around with it to get better performance and get even more stuff that we can play on it. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but for the cheap top 10 that we're going to do today, this is actually like a very good handheld, and a handheld I personally have some connection with, because back in the day where only crappy handhelds was dominating the AliExpress handheld pages, this was one of the better ones. And still, even now when making the top 10, I think this thing is still worth picking up if you don't want to pay a lot of money for a handheld. It comes with a wide screen and it doesn't come with an IPS, which you can see over here. So it's very low quality. So this is not like the best quality handheld you can get, but more take consideration, I think, with all or better than most of these budget devices, with this price range, we're going to get an LCD display with some pretty damn poor view angle. But overall, it has some media player, you can listen to some music, stuff like that. Crappy camera was included and the crappy microphone. But of course, the gameplay, we had some MAME, 16-bit, 8-bit, and the overall performance was, in my opinion, not bad. Yeah, it's still like a cheap handheld, and you can notice, especially with some platforms, that you have some limitations here and there. But I find it very fascinating that it's still a very nice handheld that keeps up, because when you're going to buy yourself a PlayStation Portable fake ones from X6, X9, stuff like that, what you're going to see is that it's still going to have the same issues. And the overall performance of this device again was not bad at all, and I was quite surprised. So I think this is the reason why it deserves my number 9 spot, still even after years I've reviewed the first one back in the day. For the number 8 position, I choose the Handheld Game Station. It's an, when I say copy, but it's more like a lookalike of the Retroid Pocket we've reviewed back in the day. And this, like the budget edition, this thing is also very dirty cheap to buy. It still has an emulation performance of, let's say, the first generation of PlayStation PSP Vita. So the overall performance was not great, but again, it's what you're going to get with these cheap versions. We're going to get different colors over here. I chose the white color, or I'm hoping they send it to me. But then overall, what you're going to get with this, we're going to get a D-pad, an analog stick, 6-button layout. So basically when you want to play some old school 8-bit, 16-bit and handhelds, this will be like enough. It also have the option to an AV out, not really fancy, just some basic SCART. The display itself, 3.5 inch, it's not an IPS, it's a slightly better display than the PAPKIII that I've shown before, so the view angle is slightly better. So when it comes to the emulation performance, but also what can it play. So basically what it can play is not Street Fighter V, because I don't get it why they're using these pictures, but it just runs 8-bit, 16-bit. Think about NES, Super Nintendo, Mega Drive, Super Master System, stuff like that, and some arcade. But arcade especially going to be like the basic stuff. We're going to get some thumbnails that we can change out, so it's very limited. So far I know when I'm making this top 10 there is no different firmware for this, so what you see is what you're going to get. But despite this thing has some issues when it comes to gameplay of the Super Nintendo, it still has a pretty damn good emulation performance for a cheap device. Yeah, and again, like the display, it's tiny, it's 3.5 inch if I'm saying it correctly. But what I do like, it's very colorful and very vibrant for an old school LCD. And I really enjoy playing some Pirates of the MAME game. It's pretty damn awesome. And you can see like it does run, in my opinion, a little bit choppy, but it's still playable. It's a fun piece of technology, it's cheap, and we can play a lot of games with it. Okay, so for the number 7, we are choosing the Super Arcade Emulator. And yeah, it's kind of a weird name for a handheld, but when you're looking at the other one that we just reviewed, it looks kind of similar, like they switched the D-pad, the analog stick, and that's also the reason why I love this device, because they, in my opinion, put the D-pad on the right position. And yeah, and overall it's like a cheap device. When it comes to the software, it's the same story. We're going to have like support for 8-bit, 16-bit, Game Boy, stuff like that. The emulation itself, the performance, it's okay. It still has some issues here and there. Sadly, the system has been locked when it comes to the software, so we cannot do anything about that. I play a lot of fighting games, so the 6-button layout, I love it. The D-pad is a long travel, very sturdy, but I think it's a pretty good one in my opinion for a cheap device, because with cheap devices everything feels cheap. The display looks cheap, the buttons feel cheap, but still it was playable when it comes to playing some games. The menu itself is very nice. It is stylish in my opinion. It looks way better than the previous model. At the bottom we're going to get this gigantic row that basically shows every single system that we can play. And you can see over here that this thing has a lot of support of different systems. NES, Game Boy, Game Advance, Color, Super Famicom, Mega Drive. It's crazy and you can do a lot of things with it. Sadly, when it comes to the menu, same problem that we don't have a lot of configurations. When it comes to emulators or any key functions, stuff like that, it's locked, and that is the thing that we're always going to see with these cheap devices. Okay, so when it comes to quick load and quick save with this handheld, we do have the option for this, but here you can see there is no configuration of, let's say, aspect ratio, stuff like that, filters whatsoever, nothing. But the quick load, quick save is very basic, only one save slot for each game so far I know. Okay, so when you're looking at this product, the emulation performance is exactly what you can expect from a cheap device like this. The emulation overall is pretty good in my opinion, but sadly, like, we still have some minor issues here and there. But again, like, you get what you pay for when it comes to this handheld. Hey guys, so next up we're going to take a close look at the Gamebox Power A6. And what I do like about this model is that it has a kind of interesting form factor. So this thing is slightly different when it comes to the previous model again. So this time I'm going to get this weird D-pad, but I did like the analog stick. So that's the reason I also give it like a little bit higher place, so it makes this thing better playable, let's put it that way. Another thing I do like about this is it comes still with a lot of support emulators. I'm going to get a lot of awesome features. It came even with an extra controller that I basically don't like because the D-pad feels really rubbish in combination with this really horrible slider joystick. But yeah, it comes with a free controller. Then we're going to get ourselves like a very interesting, let's say, kind of a model, because we do have all the functionalities, volume control on and off. We're going to get an Nintendo Switch joystick, 6-button layout. There are no shoulder buttons, so 6 buttons only. And that doesn't really matter because most of the games will use a maximum of 6 buttons. And of course, including the official BL5C. And it is basically just a Nokia battery. What I really like about it, because you can buy these things very cheap for spare ones. And so if you want to give yourself like a couple of hours of playtime, you can do that very easily with an extra BL5C or get yourself a bigger one. Alright, so let's take a close look at the 3.5-inch display, and you can see like it's the same LCD display that we have seen before, just a basic view angle, nothing really fancy. Again, cheap handheld, cheap LCD display. The menu looks slightly different when you're looking at all the other models, but the result when it comes to the gameplay is exactly the same, including for all the options. Think about the settings or the quick load and quick save. When it comes to emulation support, is absolutely the same with all the other models we have reviewed. Only difference is that sometimes we're going to get some minor differences with the main menu I've shown you before. The performance are the same, so I would not be surprised this thing runs exactly the same, let's say hardware in combination with the software, only they're just basically given a different shell, or there is a different factory making the new kind of handheld, but only using the same kind of specs in combination with the same kind of software emulation. So the performance itself, it's not bad at all. I found it quite interesting. Also 16-bit runs pretty good. There is no software update whatsoever, so what you see, what you get with this cheap handheld. But still, I do like the analog stick, so that's the reason I give this thing a slightly bigger number in the top 10 list. Okay, so higher up in the list, I'm choosing the Keep Fighting handheld, also known as the handheld game console, the NX35. Again, it's going to be the same low power devices we have seen like a couple of times now. That's what you're going to get when you're having like a price point of up to $60. Of course, we can find some hidden gems here and there, but I think this Keep Fighting is a pretty cool piece of technology. It's still low powered hardware in combination with some basic emulation. The support is the same, NES, Super Famicom, let's say 8-bit, 16-bit, Game Boy, stuff like that, and of course MAME and Neo Geo is compatible with this. And yeah, what I do like about it, again, the 6-button layout, it's the same thing. That is just something they're doing, especially in this year when making this top 10. They're bringing out the same kind of configurations when it comes to the joysticks and the buttons. Only where we're going to see the big differences are the buttons itself. There we're going to see like differences when it comes to the size, the travel, and how they feel. There is no D-pad. Normally I would be like quite disappointed, but the reason I still liked it and even bump it up a little bit higher in this top 10 because this thing has like a very nice Nintendo Switch joystick. And this makes this thing worth picking up in my opinion, because if you want to play some games and you just like a joystick, it's actually pretty damn good. But I'm about the D-pad, but most of the time when you're adding a D-pad, it really sucks, so in my opinion, it's not really a loss. The layout itself, here you can see the same 6-button layout. There is no back button, so the only thing that we're going to get is 6-button at the front. The only downside I found is the menu itself. It's the PS Vita knockoff. We have seen this menu with many of the X series handhelds. Think about the X6, the X9, the X12 and name it. Have more like this weird, I don't know which kind of software it's running on, maybe kind of a Linux. Don't know, to be honest, there is no way of finding out. Maybe if somebody knows, let me know in the comments. But what you're going to get with this is basically the same result. And the same result, I mean, like, we're going to have some issues when it comes to emulation. We still have the same support when it comes to emulator like the previous model. Most of the cheap devices will have this. So we do have some, let's say, poor emulation when it comes to Super Nintendo. So I'm a little bit of a bummer in my opinion, but when it comes to other devices, it runs okay. Again, like these cheap devices will have all kinds of issues when it comes to emulation. But the overall performance to these devices is just okay, and most of the games are playable. And the combination with the button layout and with the analog stick, I personally think it's pretty cool to play in Street of Rage 2 of the Mega Drive. And here you can see like it runs pretty damn good. and that's the thing with these cheap devices. But overall, I bump it up a little bit in the list because I do like the display. The analog stick is pretty cool. And yeah, despite of not having a D-pad, I think it's not a big of a deal. Despite of the software that I'm not a big fan of. But yeah, when you're looking at the other ones, it doesn't matter how the menu look or how the emulation is. Because in the end, you're going to get most of the same results. The simply is like, this is what we're going to do with cheap devices. Well, we'll bump this up a little bit higher in the list because I think it got a nice joystick. Pretty good, okay display. And the overall performance is for the money. We can't complain. Okay, so next up. Let's go with the Pocket Go Retro, and the reason I just put this thing in the list, it's a really old piece of technology, and you can still find it by the way, but I really love it. It has a very tiny display, but it got a very nice display. The price point of this thing is pretty damn cool, and you have the freedom that you want just to do whatever you want with it. When it comes to emulators, it comes with open dingus, you can play a lot of homebrew games, so even you pay a slightly little bit of money, but you're going to get just more worth of your money. It's a tiny device, so it's even very compact. If it's comfortable, that's depending on how big your hands are. For me, it's okay. It's got a very nice D-pad. It's still got 6-button layout, so it will have some limitations, especially if you want to play PlayStation 1. So take in consideration, if you want to play some PlayStation 1, for example, yeah, two-dimensional games will run okay on this, depending on what kind of emulator you're using in combination with what game. But it's like pushing this thing to the limit. But what I do like about this device, it does like more like a better quality touch to it. It comes with it the shell. When it comes to the D-pad, there's no analog stick this time. And the form factor, I'm a big fan of it. And not to forget, the emulation, you can change out some settings if you're having some issues. The overall performance is better than all the other ones when it comes to like emulation performance and yeah, what you can just do with it. If you want to tinker with it, the Pocket Go is a really cool piece of technology that you can still buy for not a lot of money. And yeah, it brings you just more options. Still has some screen tearing, but so far I understand there were some firmware updates for this. In the end, I think for the money, we can't complain again. Only you're paying a little bit more and you're going to get more in the end. Despite we are going to leave the $30–35 price range up close to the 60, I must say that what you're going to get is so much more value. So the gameplay HDMI, some people will hate it, some people will love it. So basically this thing belongs in the budget top 10. The reason why is very simple. It has a beautiful display. The button layout is absolutely not bad at all. We're going to get some good audio. And not to forget, like all the features, all the stuff we couldn't do with the previous model, we can do with this thing. Like HDMI out, like none of them like the previous ones had this. The handheld is slightly bigger of course than the Pocket Go. Because this is like a really full size machine. So for people with adult bigger hands, you can just basically play this thing pretty damn good. Then of course the display, it looks amazing. At the front we're going to get 2 stereo speakers and we do have some things that we can change out. Where we're going to get some with the cheap device a couple of options, now we're going to get way more. It runs on Android, so basically we can switch to Android and start tinkering with that if you want to. And overall it's quite an interesting piece of hardware when it comes to the things we can do with it. Of course, we're going to have a quick load and quick save option, and that has also way more options when it comes to that. And overall, like the performance was pretty damn cool. And yeah, the D-pad was maybe not one of my favorite ones, but it has a very nice touch to it. It is actually like a normal D-pad now, and we're going to get 2 analog sticks comparable with the Nintendo Switch. So when you're looking to all the options, nice D-pad, 2 analog sticks, 8 buttons, it has so much more to offer now. And does it have more to offer, where the other ones, like basically the highest stuff they can bring to the table is 8-bit, 16-bit stuff and some arcade. This thing plays basically N64 with some restriction of course, because they are running on old Android, like lower spec stuff, so some games will not run at all, but basic stuff like in Lamborghini Racing or Diddy Kong will run just fine, so we can enjoy those old retro games. PlayStation Portable has a lot of compatibility with some games, so when you're looking at this device, it has so absolutely more to offer compared with the cheap one, and the only thing you need to pay is a couple of dollars more for this in my opinion, and it is absolutely worth it. But don't get me wrong, this thing is not perfect in many ways. Like PlayStation Portable is compatible, but not all the games will run fine. PlayStation 1 on the other hand will run fine on this device. But yeah, that's what you're going to get with this piece of hardware. But that's just for the reason I put it a little bit higher in the list. For the money, it has a lot to offer. For the number 2, I have chose to place the Family Pocket. The reason I wanted to put this thing on the number 2 position, because does it support more games than the number 3? No, but this thing is really dirty cheap, and we're going to get a lot of different emulators that can be run on this. I really love the form factor of this thing. It's compact, it's got a very nice D-pad, still it's limited with the 6 buttons, but still I think it's a pretty cool piece of hardware. Especially because this is the top 10 budget list, and compared with the money you're paying for this, yeah, you're going to get quite a nice LCD display. We're going to get a support of many different systems, and it even comes with, of course, the BL5C battery, but again, it has a lot to offer. It's a fun fact, like, it is a rip-off from the original Famicom. It's kind of weird that they did that, but it basically, like, they slapped better performance, better hardware, and a display inside of this machine, and they're selling it still for cheap. Yeah, so we will have some limitation when it comes to support, but in combination with a nice LCD display, it's still not an IPS, of course. We can play some old school 8-bit, 16-bit. There's a lot of stuff you can play with that you couldn't play with the other models, like the number 4, 5, stuff like that. But when you're looking at the quick load, quick save menu, we got a couple of slots over here, and when we're going to make a save, it even gives you like this very nice screenshot, so you know where you're basically left the last time you've played it, and where there is a save slot or not. So even games like Sonic 3 will run just very nice on this. So let's do a quick load. You see I made a save already in the bonus stage, and it instantly load. So the function and the feature of this device is quite interesting, and I personally really love it. But the biggest surprise of this handheld is that it basically costs less than the other ones. It maybe has some, let's say, a lack of an analog stick, but then overall I do like it because the emulation was quite good compared with the other ones. It was maybe the best for your price that you're going to pay for it. So that's what I do like about this tiny beast of a family pocket. It was a surprise to begin with. So that's the reason I want to put it on place number 2, and I already like added this to my previous top 10s, and the reason just is because I love this handheld for what it is, and for me, like, not only what you're going to get, the price, it's also like the connection I'm having with a certain handheld, and that's the reason I want to put it on number 2 position. And for the number 1 position, I want to choose the Powkiddy, the V90. And the reason why is quite simple. This thing is dirty cheap. It's a clamshell design, so it makes it really compact. And I think you're going to get a lot of value for your money. And also, like, I think in 2021 I did place this one on number 1. I'm still doing it because I really love this. So like I said in my previous part of this video, it's like I need to have a connection. I just need to see what do I pay for it, what do I go to get. And this thing has so much to offer in my opinion. Even with the stock firmware, it's not bad at all. And there are even some updates to make this thing even better. You can tinker with it when it comes to the software, the emulators, and the performance is so much better. The device doesn't have an analog stick, but the D-pad plays amazing. 2 speakers. We're going to get all the buttons that we're going to need. 4 action buttons at the front, but also we're going to get 4 buttons at the back. Yep. So basically we're going to get 8. This system does support PlayStation 1, but again, it's slightly underpowered, so with some 2-dimensional games it will run okay. 3-dimensional games, there we're going to see like this thing will lag. But again, it's a cheap device, and that is what you're going to get with cheap devices nowadays. PlayStation 1 can be supported, but will not get perfect performance. Comes with a beautiful display, something you don't see very often. It does have like a big bezel. It's a little bit of a bummer, but yeah, again, for the money, this is what you can expect. So when it comes to the emulators, we got so much more to, when it comes to the support. I think like the best support of all the handhelds in this top 10, like Neo Geo Pocket, Wonder Swan, stuff that we didn't see even on the other cheap devices, because most of them like will use 8-bit, 16-bit and arcade and some Game Boy stuff. So with the emulators you can change out a lot of things. You do have a quick load, quick save function. Depends of where you can find it when it comes to the emulator itself. There is where we're going to get the biggest difference with this piece of hardware and software combined. Is that you're going to get so much more to offer when it comes to, let's say, emulation, configuration, stuff like that. It works very well. And the games don't have any of these weird issues that we have seen before with all the other cheap devices. But when you're looking at, let's say, another emulator, the Super Nintendo part, here we're going to get even more stuff that we can change out. We can add the frame count, but also change out aspect ratio, stuff like that. and I find it quite fascinating. The game plays very well, and I really love the controls itself. Okay guys, so this is my top 10 for the budget series, top 10 for 2021. So it's like a freaking nightmare finding the right one for this top 10, because there are so many of these things. I didn't include any X series now because like the X series are completely obsolete when it comes to these top 10 videos now. The game books basically rule let's say the budget landscape at the moment, but again, the Powkiddy V90 is in my opinion the undefeated champion, because for the money you're paying for it, you're going to get so much more in return. It's a really fun device to bring with you, yeah, and because you're not paying a lot for it, if it accidentally broke, it's not a big of a deal, you got another one, but the end is like you can play so much cool things on it. A little bit more juice in combination with better software will give you even more support, but even the software update will give you more and better things to play with. I want to thank you for watching. Consider subscribing, hit the little bell, let me know in the comments what is your favorite one, and I will see you in the next video.